Okay, so welcome to all of you. Today is the current topics in autism. Today's lecture is What is the Life Plan? We want to welcome all of you who are joining us today. This is a 6-part series. This is number 5 in this series of lectures in this area. So again, welcome to all of you. We appreciate you joining us. Today's presentation is a collaboration between SmartCare Behavioral Health Consultation Services. It is a program of the Vista Hill Foundation here in San Diego and the Autism Society of San Diego. SmartCare Behavioral Health Consultation Services. First, briefly, a little bit about me. My name is Shirley Fett. I am a family nurse practitioner. I'm also a pediatric mental health specialist. I work in the SmartCare Behavioral Health Consultation Program, and my colleague and co-presenter today is here, and I'll let Alyssa go ahead and introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Shirley. My name is Alyssa Label, and I am the program manager for SmartCare Behavioral Health Consultation Services. So this is a program that's free to the community in San Diego, and we support primary care doctors in treating mental health concerns, as well as supporting patients and families in getting access to mental health services in San Diego. One thing that we do in our program is we provide trainings such as this series. So I hope you all enjoy. It's one that's near and dear to my heart, as I have several family members who are on the autism spectrum, and which is one of the reasons why I'm a board member of the Autism Society. So I'm really glad we could do this presentation in partnership.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. And I'll also add to the SmartCare Behavioral Health that we do provide support and consultations for adults as well. So if someone is an adult or has an adult family member and you need access to services, we also do that as well. And as mentioned, this is a collaboration between SmartCare and the Autism Society San Diego. The mission of the Autism Society San Diego is to improve the lives of all affected by autism. If you're interested in learning more about this organization, I've put the website and an email and phone number up here for you. So please feel free to reach out, go to the website, see what we do. A little bit more about me. As I mentioned, professionally, I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm also a board member for many years of the Autism Society San Diego. My interest and dedication to this community is that I am the mother of 2 now adult sons with autism spectrum disorder. My youngest is 28 and my oldest is 30. In today's language, they would be considered level 3 with intellectual delay. They still live with my husband and I here in San Diego, and they're the light of our lives. And so I am really happy to be a part of this community and work with all of you and share information that could be helpful to all of you. As far as today's lecture goes, what we'd like is if you have questions or comments, please use the chat feature in Zoom, and Alyssa will be monitoring that for us. At the end, with time permitting, we'll open it up to questions and comments, and I'm happy to spend a little time speaking with all of you at the end. But during the presentation, if you have things you want to bring up or ask questions about, please feel free to put those right into the chat for us. Thank you. And again, this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and it will be uploaded to the Autism Society San Diego YouTube channel, and that should be later today and be available to all of you. So reality check, autistic children become autistic adults. Who knew, right? So let's just start out with today's topic is about life planning, and life planning should be for the trajectory. Services drop off and jobs are often hard to come by when individuals become adults. Plus, most research on autism has focused on children. So we don't know a lot at this time, evidence-based, what is and is not working. And I think that lack of scientific evidence and hard data makes it difficult to really know what's going to be helpful for families and individuals, as well as what works. Currently, most adults with autism, about 80%, live with their parents after high school. I would be in that 80% group. So that's factually correct right now. 85% of autistic adults who graduate from college are still unemployed. So again, this is not solely based on individuals who just have intellectual delay. There are struggles even in individuals who don't have an intellectual delay and are quite academically capable. They're still struggling. So that really needs to be considered as your life planning. Unemployment among people with autism is approximately 90%. 85% of autistic adults live with their parents, as mentioned, a higher 80–85%, and 40% of individuals with autism spectrum disorder will not successfully achieve a high school diploma. So we're going to talk about different things in this area as we move along. About 50,000 children with autism turn 18 every single year. So I've mentioned earlier, kids with autism become adults with autism. So planning for their life is really important. I think generically, life goals, and this is true not just in the autistic arena, but it's for all of us. What are generic goals for everybody? You want to be accepted. You want to be involved in your community at some level. You want to have a degree of social success. You'd like to live as independently as possible, and you'd like to have vocational and financial stability. Those are good life goals for all of us, I think, and I think we need to apply these concepts to life planning for an individual on the spectrum as well. This is a lot of information, but this is a really broad overview of what planning across the lifespan, considerations that we all need to take into consideration when we're planning. I think as caregivers, people involved in the individual's life, we need to learn about autism spectrum disorder and therapy and treatment options. I think we're really dedicated to this when our kids are young. You know, we're going to be out there, we're going to learn about therapies, treatments, and we're go. And understandably so, I was in that group. But I want you to really think about, there are therapy and treatment options that extend into adulthood. And so I think we need to continue to be engaged as individuals in the lives of an adult about what are best practices, what's working for adults now. So I think we should maybe get a little weary and a little tired, and I think we have to pace ourselves, but I think that that's an ongoing life planning goal for those of us involved in the care of our loved ones. Stay as organized as you can. Keep track of reports, assessments, and data. It can be unwieldy, the amount of organizations, institutions, and paperwork that we encounter when we're working with and caring for somebody across the lifespan. So the sooner you get your own organization system in place, it's going to be a lot easier to keep track of. It can get really overwhelming if you've just got papers here, papers there, and then all of a sudden the day comes, they're 18 and you're like, I need proof of disability. And it's like, where is it? So try and really get an organizational system that works for you and keep track of information as it comes in. You really need to consider a will and consider a special needs trust. I'm going to touch on that a bit more later in this presentation. As much as you can, you need to be encouraging independence by teaching life skills. Again, I'm going to talk about what kinds of things need to be worked on in the younger years all the way through adulthood. Again, I think we all focus a lot on academics when our kids are in elementary, middle, and high school, as well we should. That is important. But teaching life skills, those two things are not mutually exclusive. By that, I mean, you can be working on all the academic goals and have in the IEP and programming life skills as well. Why do you think those individuals that have achieved college diplomas aren't working? They really struggle in the life skills, life management areas is what is, I think, emerging, is learning how to be at work and budgeting and managing their life. So life skills should be concurrently being addressed through the lifespan. Learn to be a really good advocate and teach the person with autism self-advocacy skills. And that can, again, start at a really young age. These are not just for adults. 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds. I can't tell you how many calls Alyssa and I get through our program of bullying of kids with autism in school. And so empowering them, teaching them at whatever their capacity is, how to be an advocate for themselves. And we need to partner with that individual and help them with those skills. Find social and recreation activities to promote socialization. I think there's some really amazing programs here in San Diego for kids and adults, and that really support their unique needs. And I encourage all of you to really look into that and work on building some social and rec programming that your child and adult enjoy. Consider if, when, and how you will discuss the person's diagnosis with them. This was discussed at last week's lecture. We went into quite a bit of a conversation about disclosure. And I do encourage those of you who missed it, who are interested in this, to watch this topic. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this today, but it's going to come up when we talk about transitioning to college and other aspects in the adult life, and a person either comfortable or not comfortable with disclosing their diagnosis and how that might play out. And find time for yourself to relax. Remember, we're human. Our capacity can get full, our cup can get full very quickly. And I think across the lifespan, you have to pace yourself. I will often say to parents and people, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So take care of yourself, because this is a long trajectory of life. Make sure your family and loved one is safe, pretty straightforward. Prepare for life cycle events such as family transitions, holidays, vacations as much as you can. If you know that grandma and grandpa are moving to Florida and they're not going to be around anymore, make sure you plan for those transitions in life and how that's going to impact the individual with autism and help prepare them. Holidays, how timely is that? The holidays are coming up, always a really stressful time, but planning across the lifespan also is creating space for the individual with autism to be a part of all of these things and to be able to navigate them comfortably. And make sure you're constantly investigating all funding options for services. Sometimes I hear folks say, oh, well, we have enough money to pay for XYZ. And I say, and what happens when you're not here anymore? And the bank of mommy or the bank of daddy or the bank of whoever it is no longer available. And we haven't applied for all of the possible public benefits that this person was eligible for. And now we've left that for somebody who's very green or maybe has no idea how to do that. So I'm a big proponent of, yeah, maybe you don't financially need this person to have XYZ right now, but what happens when something happens to me tomorrow and I didn't get everything in place that I possibly could before I leave this planet? So food for thought on that. Investigate all funding options for services. So let's briefly talk about a little bit of an autism roadmap. I decided today to break this down into age groups because I wasn't sure who the audience was going to be. And I know some of you probably are here with fairly young and newly diagnosed children. So let's talk about the early years, the birth to 3 years old, if the child is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder or at risk from the 0 to 3 window. Most of the time they'll identify a child as showing signs of autism, may not formally diagnose them until 3 or older. But let's say you're in this group. So get established with early intervention services, which would include starting intake with the San Diego Regional Center, which is the agency in town that does case management for individuals with developmental disabilities through their lifespan. Get a comprehensive developmental evaluation. This is a very powerful thing, and I do encourage all of you, if you've not had a pretty comprehensive developmental eval, to get that done in these early years. This might include evaluations by a psychologist, a speech therapist, occupational therapy, physical therapy, medical evaluations, again, to rule out co-occurring conditions, which could be implemented through a developmental pediatrician. Developmental pediatricians are pediatricians who've gone on to additional training for 2 up to 3 years. And the additional training they get is in treating and evaluating children with developmental delays or developmental differences. So they have unique expertise in this area. Neurologists may be part of that. A geneticist may be involved with these medical evaluations that I do encourage all of you to pursue and look into in these early years. Public school does offer early intervention programs for the 0 to 3. My sons both were diagnosed prior to age 3 and were in San Diego Unified's early intervention program, early intervention preschool. So you don't have to wait to 3 to access public school services. If you know that your child has already been assessed and they're saying it might be autism, get going in these different service models. You can also start beginning to access behavioral intervention services, things like ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis, and there's a program in town for early intervention, which also includes parent training called Project Impact. You should probably also apply for a Social Security card for your child if you haven't done so. You're going to need a Social Security card. Again, there's going to be lots of public benefits and all kinds of things. I think we should do that anyway for any kids, but just kind of as an add-in, I thought, apply for a Social Security card as well. Okay, so these are the littles. And then we have the 3 to 5 year olds. Again, contact your public school district if you're not already enrolled in their 0 to 3 program. If you're in the 0 to 3, they'll transition you automatically to the 3 to 5 year old early intervention preschools. But if not, contact your public school district and state, my child has autism or is suspect for autism and I want to get them enrolled. They will establish an IEP with your child. That means the school staff will evaluate your child, and an IEP is an individualized education plan. They'll come up with goals, needs, may include speech, OT, and some preschool services. So again, that's free and it's a public benefit and it's federally mandated that this needs to be provided by all districts. Again, begin identified services if you're not already involved in those, which again, may include speech, occupational therapy, ABA therapy, physical therapy. There are some other services such as RDI and other types of therapies out there. So this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is an example of the kinds of things that should be and can be happening at this point in time. Again, if you're not a San Diego Regional Center client, you need to apply. At that time, if at 3, a lot of people feel like, oh, I was a regional center client till my child was 3, and then I wasn't anymore because they stopped paying for services. So in the 0 to 3 group, regional center usually pays for these early intervention services. And at 3, they will say to you, okay, we're not going to pay for these anymore, because at 3, the crystal ball changes, and all of a sudden now the school district and your private medical insurance is the primary payer of services. It doesn't mean that you're not a regional center client anymore. It just means they're not going to pay for these services. So I want to make that clear. If you are formally accepted as a client at the regional center, that's for life. Okay. They don't drop you. So most of the time from 3 and older, the primary service that most people access through regional center is respite care services. One of the other things, however, that I think is important for all of you to know is that you also can ask for a Medi-Cal waiver letter that has to come from your regional center. And then I would encourage you all to apply for Medi-Cal for your child. There's a special category of Medi-Cal in the state of California that is not based on income. Typically, Medi-Cal is for low-income families, but there is a carve-out category of Medi-Cal specifically for children with developmental disabilities. What the waiver says is you get Medi-Cal and we're waiving the financial criteria for Medi-Cal here. So you submit this letter that comes from the regional center on their letterhead that states, John Doe is a San Diego Regional Center client and is eligible for the Medi-Cal waiver. You submit that with your application and then they'll process that through. It will only be for the child. It won't be for your whole family. Because again, if your whole family doesn't financially qualify, they're not going to get Medi-Cal. So I want to make that clear. And that's a really valuable thing to get from regional center, because otherwise, if you don't qualify for Medi-Cal financially, you're not going to get it. And there's a lot of reasons moving forward in this life that you would rather have Medi-Cal. And one of them is IHSS, in-home supportive services. You have to have Medi-Cal to apply for IHSS. What is IHSS? You say it is a county funded program that pays for the individual with the disability to be cared for in their home so that they don't have to be institutionalized. I will tell you, in the 3 to 5-year-old group, it is not impossible to get IHSS, but it's harder, because what the criteria for services is, what does this person require for care that's above and beyond a person of the same age? So let's face it, if you've got a 3, 4, 5-year-old, they still need help getting dressed. They still need help taking their bath. They still need help with eating. They aren't expected to cook their own meals or do their own laundry. What happens though, as the kids get older, and if they still have a lot of needs in these areas, you can get a certain number of hours a month that they will pay someone to provide those services. So as the individual gets older, actually what happens is you typically can get more and more IHSS hours if they continue to have deficits in those areas. That being said, I'm not saying you can't and shouldn't apply at an early age, but it might be more of a battle and you might not get as many hours. And there's a whole lot of other things that attach to IHSS. I'm not going to spend today talking in all the minutia of IHSS, but I wanted to put it out there saying it is a program, and many, many families get IHSS, but you got to have Medi-Cal first in order to apply. So now our little one has started school, and they're talking about elementary through middle school years. IEP should follow the student throughout. It's so interesting. I hear a lot of times families say that, you know, if you have a child with autism who has no intellectual delay, and so they're academically capable, sometimes the families will go, they told us we didn't need an IEP anymore. And I'm like, well, what about in the social pragmatics area, or do they still have sensory issues? Well, yeah, and they'll talk about lots of challenges they're having. And I'm like, go back and ask to have the IEP reinstated. So be careful about them saying they don't need an IEP anymore, because they're actually doing grade work at school, because there's so many other areas that individuals with autism can and should get support through the school district that are not just academic. IEPs are done every year, and then they do what's called the big transition IEPs anytime there's a placement change, or at a minimum every 3 years. So if your child's going from elementary to middle school, the whole team comes together and does more comprehensive assessments. Or if you're moved and you're starting at a new school, they might do these bigger assessments. But transition IEPs again, are with each placement change in every 3 years, but you do have IEPs at a minimum once a year. And you frankly can get call for an IEP team meeting anytime you feel there's a need or there's a problem or something new has come up. Try to continue with therapies and services as much as you can and as appropriate. Sometimes people are like, yeah, they weren't getting anything else out of, ABA, so we quit. Just because you quit a therapy at 6, 7, or 8, and then all of a sudden now they're 10, 11, 12, and there's issues coming up, you can revisit those therapies. It's not a one and done. So think about that. Understand that maybe taking a break from some therapies was a good idea, but now new things have come up or different things that are happening and they need to get back into different kinds of therapies. That's always an option and should be. Continue to work on those self-advocacy goals, safety goals, grooming, and hygiene. Again, I see these often fall off on individuals who are very academically capable, but this is a very important thing across all levels of autism to work on self-advocacy, being safe, grooming, and hygiene goals. Again, continue to monitor for co-occurring conditions such as ADHD, anxiety, depression, OCD, seizures, and continue to seek appropriate evaluations and treatment. There is some data that seems to correlate that when individuals hit puberty with autism spectrum disorder, that can sometimes be a trigger for an underlying seizure disorder. So I just mentioned that here to be mindful of that. If you start seeing some behavioral changes or blanking out or really, sleep dysregulation, a variety of things that just is all of a sudden seems to crop up out of nowhere. Don't overlook a neurology evaluation because it could be that this individual's developed seizure disorder. And again, the context could be onset of puberty. So I just put that out there for you. Transition planning should begin in the middle school. It's required at age 16, but in my opinion, it should be discussed and included in the IEP much sooner. I think 16 is a little late to even start the conversation about what's transition to adulthood going to look like. I would say to you, if you have a not autistic child and they are in middle school, how many parents wait until 16 before they ever talk to their child about what do you think you want to do when you graduate? Hopefully everybody's talking to their kids way before that, not that you have to know exactly what school you're going to go to or what career you want to be. I think this is a travesty that they have this in the law that you don't have to talk about this till 16. Our kids need lots of time, lots of repetition, and lots of planning. All the law says is they have to talk about this at 16. I'm empowering all of you to say you should be starting to talk about transition planning at age 13, 14, in that range. That can be, he loves zoo animals and wants to do an internship working at the San Diego Zoo. Okay, these things take time to prepare. He really wants to learn how to drive a car. Okay, let's figure out what skills we need to develop so that when he's 16, 18, 20, maybe we can get there. But I strongly advise you to start having transition goals and transition language in the IEPs in middle school and not wait till 16. So here we are. We're 16 now and older. So at age 16, you can obtain a state of California ID card, and I would encourage you to include that in the IEP plan. I was sharing with Alyssa as we were doing a run through on this that I actually had the school had that in the IEP transition goals, and we had their one-on-one aides and the school staff help set them up and take them over to the DMV and get that going. So that was helpful to us. Planning is really going to be centered around the concept of person-centered planning, as it should be. Person-centered planning is exactly as the name described. The person with autism is at the center of all planning. Their wishes, their desires, their needs, their goals are front and center on what we want to talk about. And so the schools can start also implementing person-centered planning as they develop the IEP and as they develop transition goals. It's a little bit of a paradigm shift. I think if you asked everybody at the schools or service providers, they'd say, well, of course that person is at the center of it all, but is it really, or is it my goals as the mother and is it the school's goals because that's what the program is that they have to offer them? So really start to embrace the concept of what is it that this person really wants and needs for their life and how do we make that happen with them? Many of you may not know that the Department of Rehabilitation here in San Diego has work programs for this mid-range youth. I think it goes from 16 to 21. It's a different program than the traditional DOR. I have information on that and contact information at the San Diego Regional Center of who you would contact if you want to get that going and actually start a work program at age 16 for the individual. IEPs, as I've already mentioned, need to include goals in the areas of self-advocacy, mobility training. Mobility training isn't teaching somebody how to walk. It's what's the realistic long-term goal of their mode of getting around the community? Is it going to be taking Uber? Is it going to be riding public transportation? Is it going to be riding a bicycle to and from their job? I don't know. It's different for everybody, but they need to start working on how to safely navigate in the community, whatever the choices are. I had a patient at my office when I was doing primary care, an adult autistic man who had taken the big yellow bus to school every single day. And he loved it and got on the bus willingly every day. And then he transitioned out at age 22, and his new program had made arrangements for MTS, public transportation, to pick him up and take him to his day program. And he refused to get on the MTS because nobody had ever worked with him on transitioning from a different, now in our mind, that's public transportation, right? It's like just going from the bus to MTS, whatever, what's the big deal? But it was a completely different experience for him, and he wasn't having any of it. And it was a real problem because now he was a pretty big guy, 250, 300-pound tall man and nonverbal, and they couldn't get him to the program easily because they had never worked on this. So just an example of that for you. Money management. Again, this can be done no matter how impacted the individual is. If money management is teaching an individual how to go to the store, use their debit card and check out and punch in their PIN, that's money management. Or is it bigger? You get XYZ amount from your paycheck at your job every week, and you need to pay for your cell phone and whatever else, anything that's appropriate for the level. But every person with autism can work on money management skills. And again, self-help and independent living skills, very important. Getting yourself dressed. I have consulted with families who have 18, 19-year-old academically capable children, and they are still cutting up their food and feeding them. Okay, so I'm not even making this stuff up. So self-help skills, independent living skills. And then of course, daily living skills, proper hygiene, getting organized with your backpack, your purse, what you need to get out the door every day, all of those kinds of things should be part of transition planning. I would also encourage people to start exploring whatever the post-secondary options are at least 2 years before graduating or exiting public school. That doesn't mean you have to sign up for the program. That doesn't mean you have to pick which program they're in, but start looking into it. Why? It gives you a looking glass into what the expectations of this individual are going to be in entering these various programs. Then you can start developing IEP goals based on what you see happening when they leave school. Is it okay at XYZ vocational program, school program, they're going to be in class usually from this time to this time. How are they going to get to the campus? What kinds of transportation services get them there? What kind of support services are there? For my children, they were going to be entering into adult day programs. So I wanted to see, what did that look like? What was going to be a good fit for them? My sons are both very physically fit and very active. So I wanted to make sure I chose a program where they were going to allow and be able to provide them with, more physically fit. They aren't going to want to sit inside a building all day, and they don't like to necessarily do artwork. So again, really thinking about that and figuring out what kinds of programs they have, and then working goals and striving for them to be able to be successful in whatever settings you choose. I think there's a really great agency. It's in Ohio. It's called ohioemploymentfirst.org. And they actually did do one of the few places that did some data on predicting adult success. And they actually came up with these common predictors of post-school success. I'm not saying post-graduation, but post-school, when individuals exit school. What tended to help the person have the best quality of life and be most successful? It was, one, having a collaborative network of support, both formal, meaning did we transition to a really, really solid agency that was able to provide the services and the supports they need, and informal, which would be family, friends, and community groups. So individuals who had that going for them tended to do better. Individualized career development. And again, career doesn't have to be going to college and getting a degree in mechanical engineering. It could be career development, could be this person loves painting and they want to start a micro business of selling their artwork. There's a couple of, many more, I'm sure in San Diego, but a couple I know of. There's a couple of young men on the autism spectrum. One has a toffee business locally, and the other one is a baker and has a cookie business. And Regional Center supports micro enterprising. So career development can be a lot of different things. having had authentic community-based work experience. Most public schools have relationships with the Department of Rehab and Workability, and they are able to provide real job experiences in the community as part of their high school transition activities. Individuals who had social and social emotional instruction skills, so some work in this area. We know this is a challenge for a lot of people on the spectrum. And I think helping them understand all of us that aren't on the spectrum and helping figure out how to navigate relationships in life, individuals who'd had some experience and work in that area tended to do better. Also, if there was solid academic, vocational, occupational education and preparation, those individuals again tended to have more post-school success. Supported parental involvement and expectations, again, involve family members, really help the person continue to be successful in adult life. And also if there was some opportunity for self-determination, going back to that concept of person-centered planning, you know, was this person able to say what they really wanted to do, what they really wanted for their life, and are we making that happen for them? Have they had some independent living skills instruction and skill building, and also being part of an inclusive setting and working in an inclusive environment was also a predictor of good post-school success. So I thought this was an interesting list and good for us to think about. Differences between high school and college. So there's going to be a fair number of individuals on the autism spectrum who are going to access college services. And for those of you who don't know, it's a lot of a reality check when you leave the school settings where it's a nice contained team. Love or hate your high school and your high school public school programming, they have a lot of services that don't happen in college. So on the left, and I know this is kind of busy, but I just real quickly want to go through with it. All students have a right to education in high school. And on the right, you'll see college is a privilege, not a right. There is no federal, state, county, city law that says every person that lives in the community has a right to go to college. The protections of high school are through IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act, Section 504 of the Rehab Act, and the ADA. Those are the protections that say everybody has a right to go to public school. In college, IDEA is no longer applicable. There is still Section 504 of the Rehab Act and ADA that is intact. So there are some considerations afforded individuals with disability, but it's not as tight. Number 3, a school and the team designs an IEP, and on the right, you'll see in college, a student is responsible for providing documentation that verifies disability. And I think the next one is also true. The school ensures an IEP is implemented. And on the right, the student has to identify their needs in collaboration with a counselor. I don't know, Alyssa, you want to jump in and tell this experience with your brother real quick about what happened in college?
Absolutely. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I had to put in my little earbud, but you know, one thing that happened in high school is my parents did a lot of advocacy, and my mother particularly, you know, did all the advocacy and IEP plans, and all teachers were informed. And when you go to college, you are an adult, your child would be an adult. And my brother actually had a really hard time disclosing his disability. And so when he went to college, he didn't want anyone to know that he already had a disability, and he didn't want the teachers or anyone to know too. So he chose not to access disability services. And so my mother tried, and they said, sorry, your son is a legal adult. He needs to be able to do it. And so for the first 2 years, he actually didn't have any additional services, and school was very challenging for him. And he actually ended up not passing several classes and got discouraged and actually wanted to drop out of school. He had to do a lot of work about being able to disclose and be more comfortable with his diagnosis. And so I do recommend everyone check out the previous talk that we had about disclosure and how important it can be in certain arenas. And I think college is one of those arenas where it was important for him. When he came back into the school system, he did access these services, and they were able to help him and make certain accommodations, not as many as he was able to get in high school, unfortunately, but they were able to make enough accommodations that he was able to succeed and graduate, and had a much more positive, welcoming experience.
So I appreciate that. Thanks, Alyssa, for sharing that story. So I think that's really important to consider. Mom and dads or whoever is used to being sort of the driver in a lot of these cases with the IEPs through elementary, middle, and high school, and that is not the case in college. On number 5, teacher functions as an advocate manager. Hopefully, anyway, they do, but they're the case manager at the school. And on the right, you'll see the student is responsible for their own progress. There is no case manager at college. Number 6, fundamental alterations to the program can be made in school. So I was giving an example. My sons have intellectual delays. We had them included in some mainstream classes through middle and high school. So when they were sitting in a math class and everybody was doing 9th grade math, they might have just had them doing simple addition, subtraction, which was more what they were capable of, but they were in the space and they were around the other students. So that's an alteration to the program. On the right, number 6, on college, fundamental alterations to the program are not allowed. College professors won't and aren't required to, and nor will they, change what is the expectation to pass the class because of your disability. They might be able to give you more time to take tests. They might be able to modify the length of time you have to turn in an assignment, things like that, but the work is still going to be the same. So another thing to consider. Personal services on the left, personal services can be provided by the school, for example, a one-on-one aid. That's the most common personal service, if you will. On the right, personal services are the student's responsibility. So the school, again, doesn't provide like someone to be a note taker for you necessarily, or to be your navigator around campus, to facilitate social interactions. That's going to be responsibility of the individual. And on the left, school transportation is provided, and on the right, transportation to and from school is not provided. So again, why did we talk about mobility training earlier? Individuals need to learn how to get from point A to point B in life. And so if college and trying to figure out how to navigate a college campus is part of it, maybe that's part of your transition plan, visiting the school that you think they're going to go to and getting the lay of the land. This is where the bathrooms are. This is how you get, this is where you get on and off the bus if you're taking the bus to school, to my point. And then number 9, the parent or the guardian is usually the primary advocate for the individual through school. And on the right, to Alyssa's point, students are expected to be their own advocates in college. Now, these aren't hard and fast rules. There's some disability student services programs, but generally, this is the expectation. So what does happen at age 18? I want to again refer you back to the Autism Society YouTube channel. And we have a topic that we gave earlier this year titled When My Child Becomes an Adult, What Will Happen? And it's on the YouTube channel. I would encourage you to watch that. Some of the things we're going to touch on today, we go into much more detail in that particular lecture. So I didn't want to be redundant today and do that. Things to consider. Does the person need a conservatorship? This is a very common question that's discussed. A conservatorship is a legal process that requires a hearing before a judge to determine if the individual needs to be conserved and who should be their conservator. The regional center is included in this process. They write up a report and submit their findings to the judge and to the courts. And this is a this is taken very, very seriously because let's face it, you guys, when someone's conserved, we're taking away some of their rights. And so the judge and the legal system takes this process very, very seriously and really considers all the aspects before a conservatorship is granted. However, it is very necessary in many of our cases. So it's certainly a good thing that it's available to us, but again, it's a legal process. The child, now adult or child, will have their own attorney appointed by the courts to represent them. So they'll have their own independent attorney in this process. I've been through this twice with my sons. And so it's a county appointed attorney that comes out and meets with them and is their advocate. And then we as parents can either hire our own attorney to help file the paperwork, represent us or not. There's Legal Aid Society has a clinic for how to file your own conservatorship paperwork. So there's different options on that. You need to consider applying for SSI, which is available to people whose disabilities prevent them from gainful employment. I'm going to talk more about SSI in another channel, another slide, pardon me. Consider registering to vote. 18, we're all eligible to vote, so that might be an option. And then all males, regardless of disability, must register for selective service at the age of 18. I know that sounds wild. For me, it would be like, you've got to be kidding. There's no way my sons could ever serve in the military, but it's a requirement. So that doesn't mean they're going to get drafted. It doesn't mean they're going to be forced to go be part of the military. It just is what it is. So that's another thing just to be aware of. And then consider healthcare options. We get very used to taking our children to our favorite pediatricians, and that's great. And we get very comfortable with them, and they become part of our team, as they should. But at age 18 and older, the individual is going to need to phase out of pediatric care. Medi-Cal will pay for you to see a pediatrician until the individual's 18 years and 364 days old. When they turn 19, Medi-Cal will no longer pay your pediatrician to care for them. So I'm just letting you know, even if your pediatrician wants to see the individual and your child's on Medi-Cal, they're not going to get paid for their services after 19 and older. If you have private insurance, some pediatricians will continue to provide services until the early 20s. It's sort of at an individual basis, but I got to tell you, most of them, once the person gets to be 21, 22 or older, they're pretty much like, we can't see this person anymore. This is out of our scope of practice. And so that's one thing to be prepared for. Start thinking about where are we going to go for medical care as an adult. The other thing is if you do have private medical insurance with the Affordable Care Act, that allowed us to keep our adult children, any of our adult children, on our insurance until age 26. Most insurances do have a special way for you to apply and say, this is my adult dependent child, if you're their conservator and they're living with you, to keep them on your private insurance longer than that. But that's going to be based on your insurance company's services and what they offer, but it is worth looking into. Conservatorship. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I have had a fair amount of experience in this one because we've been through it twice with our own sons. Most common type of conservatorship for adults with autism is a limited conservatorship. There's different kinds of conservatorships out there, but this is the term you're going to hear used. And when you hear about a limited conservatorship, what it is that? This is when a judge appoints a responsible person called a conservator to assist an adult with developmental disabilities called a conservatee who is unable to provide for his or her personal and or financial needs. So I and my husband are the conservators. Our sons are the conservatees. There's 7 powers or 7 domains, if you will, that are considered within a limited conservatorship. And I will say to you that sometimes a person will be like, they need to be conserved on 3 out of the 7 or 5 out of the 7, and that can be granted. So I just want you to know straight up, it's not an all or none. Some of these can be selected out saying they're conserved for 1, 2, and 7, but the others we're not going to conserve them for, and they can still function autonomously in those domains. So these are the 7 domains. The language is kind of strange, but this is how it's written in the legalese. So if you see this, you'll know why it's written that way. Fix the conservatee's residence or dwelling. In other words, we get to pick where they live. Access the conservatee's confidential records or papers. So any confidential school records, anything else. If they got arrested, could we access their legal records, all that kind of stuff, that would be accessible if we were the conservator. Consent or withhold consent to marry on behalf of the conservatee. So we would be able to grant whether our sons could marry somebody. Enter into contracts on behalf of the conservatee. So if they're conserved, they can't sign credit card agreements legally, contracts to rent a home or apartment, any contractual things, conservator is responsible for that. The conservatee is not legally liable for that if they're conserved. Give or withhold medical consent on behalf of the conservatee. Select the conservatee's social and sexual contacts and relationships, and make decisions about the education of the conservatee. So you can see these pretty much all comprehensive, and why it's taken very seriously by the court system on whether they're going to grant this or not. And does this person really, really need to be conserved? So just so you kind of understand what they look at. It's really a good idea to consider having a life planning document for the individual. And you can start this when the individual is small. Obviously, it would need to be edited as we go through the life plan. And what is a life planning document? It's a document for your disabled family member. So it does more than preserve and protect their safety and security. It's also a way to help them enjoy a better quality of life. Preparing a life planning document will give you peace of mind, knowing that you have memorialized critical information regarding the needs of your family member is important for in the event that you are suddenly unable to care for them. I know as a mother of adult sons, myself getting older, I think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if something happens to me tomorrow? Who's going to know everything that's here in my brain or in my husband's brain and be able to pick up the ball and do everything that we do? And so this is what a life planning document is about. It is really about trying to write down as much as you can about this person so that somebody could open it up and go, okay, this is who I need to call, this is what I need to do. It is not a legally binding document, but instead provides peace of mind for those involved in the care and in caring about the person. When you're putting together one of these, you should consider the past, the present, and the future. The past can be educational and medical background, any residential or living arrangements that they may have been a part of, your family history, and religious background and information. I think that this is really important to not go into great detail, but really, really important things like if the individual had significant seizure disorder, maybe had some procedures done when they were younger. That's really important information for somebody that's caring for them to know about their medical past. The present can include upcoming medical appointments and evaluations, as well as what caregivers for your family member. You should include important information about their services, service providers, and financial information. So this is like who's their IHSS case manager, who's their case manager at regional center, who's their primary care doctor, or what day program or what supported employment program are they in. All of this kind of stuff could be in the life planning document, right? And the future is, down the road, this is what we would hope for and dream and wish for the family member, as well as the people with whom they want to be involved in their care. So really, sort of what do you hope for them long-term in terms of their care and their life? So as I mentioned, you need to try and communicate in this life planning document your encyclopedic knowledge of this person, because that's really what it is. Again, you can also include information about their personality characteristics and their personal care preferences. It could even be like they only use XYZ kind of toothpaste, or they only like this kind of toothbrush. They only like to go to this McDonald's at the corner of such and such. It can be all of those kinds of things. It can be really helpful and also help the individual with autism not be so stressed out when you're not there. The family members, as well as the trustee of the special needs trust, include information about all of that, their medical history, again, physician, individuals and organizations supporting them, their services, and who are their friends, and do they have favorite pets, favorite foods, their likes and dislikes, and again, their hopes and expectations. So I think that's a really important document to think about putting together. It can be overwhelming, but chipping away at it now, I think anybody who would fall into the space that you're in right now, caring for someone, would be really grateful to you for having done this hard work. So the burning questions are, what happens when they finish all these school services? What services and programs are available in San Diego for adults with autism? Where will they live? Who will support them financially, and who's going to care for them when I'm gone? So in San Diego, how are adult services received? I put this sign up here. It says change ahead. Everything changes a lot once they exit the school system. So be ready. It's manageable, but it's a whole other learning curve. I used to tell families that I felt like when my sons exited public school and that service model into adulthood, it felt a little bit like when they were first diagnosed. It was like a brave new world that I had to navigate and figure out who the players are and how they all fit together. Just like those of you with littles right now with, the 3, 4, 5-year-olds that are just getting into it. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many players here. It's the same thing when you transition to adulthood. It's manageable, but just be prepared for the ride. And it is going to be some changes in the way things look, but it's doable. So San Diego Regional Center is home base for most services. Adult services and resources are provided primarily through a combination of county, state, and federal funding sources, and some individuals do get services through a private pay model. So again, I talk sometimes to families with little kids, or I see messaging coming through that says, Regional Center was a waste of time. They didn't do anything for me when my kid was 6, 7, or 8 years old, so I didn't follow up with them. Stick with the regional center when your kids are younger. Maintain active client status with them, even if you're just getting minimal services, which might be respite. And why do I say that is because the regional center becomes a huge player in the lives of adults in our community once they exit public school services. So that's either going to be 18 if your person graduates with the traditional diploma at high school, or it's going to be at age 22 for those who did not achieve a high school diploma and get a certificate of completion at age 22. This is a list of all the different kinds of services and programming that the regional center can provide for an adult. In that earlier lecture that we did earlier this year, what happens when my child becomes an adult, we go into more detail about each one of these areas. I'm not, again, going to talk about that today. I only put this slide here to impress on all of you that the regional center is a very important part of the adult person's life. So keep up with your regional center status, hang in there. And again, when they're adults, there's going to be a lot more services that they will be able to provide. There's also educational options. Community colleges offer credit and no credit courses, and most have disabled student services available. So I would look into those again as part of that transition planning, at least 2 years before the individual is going to leave school. Start checking out, okay, what kind of programs are out there? Where could they possibly go? There's disability support programs and services at college campuses. There's also a couple of places that offer college living experience, trying to expose, if you will, sort of like a boot camp, if you will, for individuals who are thinking about going to college. There's a Project College at USD where individuals can go and actually stay on the USD campus, and there's staff there that help them kind of talk about, this is what college would look like. This is what a dorm room looks like. Even if the person's not going to USD, it's just an opportunity for some exposure to that. So there's a couple programs like that. San Diego Regional Center offers a tailored day program, and now they've recently started offering to everyone self-determination. Remember earlier when we were talking about the differences between high school and college, and we said in college, if you need a personal support person to accompany you, it's the student's responsibility. You can access that through either the tailored day program or self-determination service model at San Diego Regional Center. So you would put into your individual plan, I want to attend college and I need somebody to go with me to help me ride the bus and get to campus. I need them to go to class with me to help me take tests. I need them. So you can build that into your regional center plan, and through either tailored day or self-determination program, get a budget to pay somebody to support you in that way. National Foundation for Autism Research, NFAR, is a local nonprofit in the autism arena. They offer a lot of computer and tech training programs. If you're interested in that, I do believe their programs are funded through the Department of Rehab. So I would check their website and see if that's of interest to you. And again, the Department of Rehabilitation can also provide services for education. DOR, again, can start coming to your transition planning IEPs at school. Your case manager at school should know who to contact for their site and invite that person to start attending. So you can start talking about if vocational training or college, things like that are part of it, and DOR can help support the individual in that way. Housing is a huge, huge issue. It is not just for autistic people, frankly. I think it's a big issue in San Diego with our homeless population, but let's just talk about autism because that's what we're doing today. But so some questions to consider about housing for adults with autism. Can they live independently? Or do we think eventually they can live independently? Can they live on their own with in-home support? That's another option. Or will they continue to live in the family home? Or they could choose to live in an adult foster family care. So these are all viable options here in San Diego. So these are choices that, again, maybe at 18 or 22, they're not ready now, but maybe in 5 or 10 years they will be. So again, that's part of that person-centered planning that I talked about. The goal, the long-term goal is that in 10 years when they're 35, that they will be able to live in their own apartment. So we're going to work on all kinds of skills and all those mobility and money management, all that to get them ready for that life. I thought this was really a good 10 tips to consider when you're creating a real home for somebody on the autism spectrum. I think we have to be pragmatic about planning, and we have to consider what's going to fund the housing. And one of them is going to be the future of government resources. None of us know about that, but being constantly advised and aware of what kind of funding streams there are for individuals with developmental disabilities in the housing arena, and just keep that in consideration. Programs come and go, funding comes and goes, and if you're relying 100% on government resources, it's a precarious place to be. Start early with a plan. So as I said, if the plan is they're going to move into a group home, let's say this person needs 7/24 support, needs to be in a group home. Group home placements don't happen in a couple of weeks. They take weeks and months, sometimes years to find appropriate placement. So start the conversations early about this. Whatever the long-term, the goal is for housing, realistically, it takes 1 to 3 years to get there. So start planning now. And then let's say 3 years, the opportunity comes up, but the person's not ready to move yet, or you're not ready to have them move. You could always take a pass. It doesn't mean your planning is over. You just say, we're not quite ready, but let's revisit this next time the opportunity comes up. It's a dynamic situation. Try and leverage your resources, the creative use of resources. For example, sometimes 3 or 4 families might come together and buy a home and have their 3 to 4 loved ones share a home together, pooling financial resources. I read an interesting article where there was a family with 4 families, and they all had adult disabled children, and they all really liked each other and wanted to work together for this model. A couple of the families had more financial ability to buy a home, and the other 2 were less so. So they worked out a contractual agreement where the 2 families with lesser financial capabilities had a large cohort of family members who were very supportive of their loved ones and the group. And so what they did is, in lieu of as much money putting in, they agreed to work and provide services, if you will, as a group to these 3 to 4 individuals living together. So if they needed rides to appointments and help with activities, they were that person. So it doesn't have to always be divvied out equally financially. I think you just have to be creative and enter into these arrangements as best that suits everybody's needs. Things change, be flexible. Like I said, you may have had this great plan. 2 years from now, he's going to move into his own apartment, have a roommate. It's like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. Identify housing dollars separate from support and service dollars. So again, really try and be aware of what the funding streams are, what's available financially. If there's family members in your life that want to have your individual in the will, maybe there's a way to direct the money towards supporting their housing efforts, all kinds of things like that. Understand the support and service needs of the individual, having a realistic expectation of what does this person really need to be successful. I caution you that if they don't have the adequate support needs, they're going to get in trouble with the law or 911. Things like this are going to happen. So really be mindful of their safety and really what their needs are. There are support and service dollars available. I would recommend everybody sign up for Section 8 housing, which is the low-income housing voucher here in San Diego County. When they turn 18, even if you don't think you're going to use it, the waiting list is well over 10 years for the voucher. So even at 18, you say there's no way they'd live on their own. Maybe they'll be ready when they're 30 or 35 though. And that might be when your name comes up on the voucher list. Even if your name comes up, his or her name comes up and you're not ready, you say, I'll take a pass, just keep me on the list. So again, there's no harm in putting your name on the Section 8 housing list. It doesn't mandate you to take it when it comes by, but it does prepare you for what may or may not be necessary down the road. It's really important to have good advisors, both financial and other advisors in managing all of this. Try to integrate the housing plan into your estate planning. And just remember, be patient and be persistent. These things take time and planning. So how is housing funded? I think affordable housing in San Diego is not really possible. I hate to say it. We all know this. This is a real challenge. So funded housing is funded through SSI. It can be funded in part through IHSS services, Section 8 voucher, which I mentioned to you, private pay, and the regional center. So there's a variety of programs, sources, and things like this where housing can be funded. So financial planning, and again, I'm not a financial planner, but I do have some experience in this area. I think this is the trifecta of the 3 main funding streams, important things to consider in funding. So I'm going to skip to the middle, which is SSI. That stands for Supplemental Security Income. It is a federal income program funded by general tax revenues, not Social Security tax. Some people get it mixed up with Social Security. It has nothing to do with Social Security. It is a program funded by general tax revenues, and the purpose of it is to help aged, blind, and disabled children and adults who have little to no income. This is a 100% income-based program. It is intended for people who basically are poor and have no other funding. The person can have no more than $2,000 in their name. I always mention this because those of you that have little kids and then the person becomes 18, I've had a couple of people that applied for SSI not realizing that grandma and grandpa had been funding a saving program for the individual for years, and they end up having $5,000, $10,000 in their name in the bank account. SSI will disqualify you. So if you're applying, this person can have really no bank accounts with anything of any major amount in them, in their name. It has to be less than $2,000. SSI is specifically designed to help meet their basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter. There's nothing in SSI that says you can pay for tickets to go to Disneyland or to buy a car. And first of all, there isn't enough money there to do that. Even at best, I think SSI is around $950, $975 a month. Who in San Diego can live on that much by themselves in a month? Nobody. So you can see SSI is bare bones, and it is helpful. I'm not putting the program down, but it's limited. Going to jump back up to the top, and then you're going to see something called SSDI. And I think SSDI and SSI get interchanged, and they're two completely different programs. They're not the same. So SSDI is a federal insurance program that may benefit adults 18 and older who have been disabled since childhood. So it's basically an adult dependent Social Security benefit. Children under 18 can also receive benefits if their parents are also disabled. So let's say we have a 5 or 6-year-old child and mom or dad who worked for a while and then, you know, had a car accident, they're in a back injury and can't work, and they're on SSDI themselves, then the kids can get SSDI through them. But SSDI is what we pay when we say, oh, I'm going on Social Security retirement. That's what this is. So, you know, when we apply for our own Social Security, our adult children can tap into that. So it pays benefits to adults who have a disability that began before age 22 years old and whose parents paid into or received Social Security. So when I retire and decide to start drawing on my Social Security, then my 2 disabled sons can tap into my Social Security and will no longer be on SSI. Okay. I'll say that again. When the parent that paid into Social Security is getting their Social Security benefit, their adult dependent child can then get benefits through that funding stream, and they are no longer going to be on SSI. How much does that adult dependent child get when I'm alive? It's 50% of whatever I get. So if my retirement benefit from Social Security is $2,500, they'll get $1,250. And when I die, they get 75% of that. So it definitely, in most cases, pays more. There are going to be cases where people go, well, what about if my Social Security is only $1,200 a month, half of that $600, and they were getting more on SSI before? SSI will never ever let the person go below what they were getting previously on this. So they'll say, okay, you get $600 from SSDI, and then SSI pays the additional $300. So there are ways. So they'll never get less than what SSI paid, but potentially could get more. So again, I'm just letting you know that's kind of how it looks. And there is some other funding streams. I will also mention to you that after the person has been getting their SSDI for 2 years, then they're eligible for Medicare. This is why you're going to see people maybe that are 30, 40, and 50 who have Medicare. It's because their parents, they were on their parents' Social Security, they've been on SSDI themselves, and that's how they get on Medicare. After they have been on SSDI for 2 years, they can apply for Medicare. Okay, so a lot to think about there. And at the bottom, in 2014, there was a federal law passed called Achieving a Better Life Experience. And what that does is it does allow people who are on SSI to have some kind of a savings account and not be penalized for it. That's what an ABLE account is. It's a tax advantage savings account for persons on SSI that does not jeopardize their SSI and Medicaid benefits. They can save up to $15,000 per year in this account to a maximum of $100,000. If that account goes over $100,000, then they do start chipping away at SSI and their other public benefits. So $15,000 per year up to a max of $100,000. What kinds of, I'm going to show you in a minute what kinds of things ABLE will pay for. So overview of financial planning, again, be mindful of the income asset limitation of $2,000 for SSI. Think about an ABLE account. Think about a special needs trust. Think about who the guardians are going to be once you die, who's the successor guardians, and particularly for these individuals that are conserved. Think about a plan of care document. And again, IHSS is not just for little kids, it's actually more for adults. So if you haven't gotten into IHSS and there's care that still needs to be provided, apply for that. Oop, I want to be on time. I'm running over a little bit. So these are the kinds of things that the ABLE account may cover. So a perfect example, my son has an Apple desktop computer he had for 10 years and it died and I had to go get him a new one. I mean, you can buy that out of you can't buy that on SSI. They won't let you buy a new computer. But if you had ABLE account funds, you could go do that. You can do education, housing, transportation, employment, healthcare related costs, legal things, basic living expenses. So again, you know, if the apartment rent is $1,500 a month and $650 of their SSI check goes to that, they can't afford the rest, then we as parents or anybody else can fund their ABLE account. And then the ABLE account pays for these things. So that's why Social Security doesn't see it as earned income. It's because the ABLE account allows that the ABLE account becomes the payer, and that's allowed. So good to consider. There's lots of online webinars about ABLE accounts. I encourage you to go listen to them and learn more about it, but it is an option. Does a person need a special needs trust? Real quickly, probably yes, to answer your questions. Diagnosis of a disability isn't required. Really what you have to consider is whether or not the adult person can handle his or her contracts, finances, and resist fraud and undue influence. If we feel that they cannot, then a special needs trust may very well be appropriate. You need to hire a lawyer. It's a really specialized area of law. I do think you need to have a lawyer to set these up. And the special needs trust stands alone from any other living trust your family may have. So what happens basically here is this: if my sons, when we die, and all of our assets are intended for them, all the special needs trust inherits the money. And within the special needs trust, it clearly states that the money that's sitting in that special needs trust is to be used for them, but their name is not on the document, so they don't lose their benefits. It's the special needs trust for that family or something else. But within the document, there's all kinds of language that legally binds that special needs trust to only use that money for whatever you designate. And in this case, it would be the individual. So just kind of a quick overview of why that's important. If our kids or whoever inherits the money and they go way over, you can see it wipes out all these other public benefit programs that they may already be enrolled in and have access to, and you don't want that to happen. And don't forget about their social life. You know, again, adults like to go to movies and Comic-Con. They may like horseback riding. They want to go to Disneyland every year, friendships, sports. So again, if these are important, this is why an ABLE account can be really useful, because you can say, you know what, I want them for the rest of their life to be able to have an annual pass to Disneyland. You can't afford that with just your SSI check, but boy, if you fund an ABLE account, you could, right? So these are all things important in the life document to include when we talk about future planning. Don't forget about these things. Plan for success. Supporting someone with autism into adulthood can be achieved through thoughtful, careful planning, open communication with all involved parties, staying organized, and being flexible. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And again, this presentation will be uploaded to the Autism Society San Diego YouTube channel under current topics in autism. Our email address and phone number to reach Alyssa or I is here. And next week is our last, and it's going to be a fun one, but we're going to talk about all the different kinds of benefits of living in San Diego. So I'm going to put together a presentation about that just to heighten everybody's interest in what's available here in our community.